Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today, and thank you, Shauna, for the very, very kind introduction. I appreciate being mentioned even in the same sentence with Secretaries Kemp and Cisneros means a great, great deal to me. Having worked closely with them, having known Secretary Kemp, gotten to know him well over the last few years before he passed away earlier this year, and having worked so closely with Henry Cisneros, it is a legacy that I hope to live up to. So thank you very much. And it's wonderful for me to be here today at the National Fair Housing Alliance's 2009 conference. And I know that some of my colleagues, including John Trasvina, will be joining you today and throughout the rest of the week to talk about HUD's work on fair housing and the housing crisis. But I'm very pleased to be here myself today to welcome all of you to Washington, and also to share with you my vision for HUD, particularly how we can renew our commitment to fair housing enforcement and strengthen our partnerships with NFHA and FIPS and FAPS across this country. 41 years ago, when Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, we took a major step toward fulfilling Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of a united society. And since that day, we have seen great strides forward in addition to the signing of that act, but we also have a great deal of progress yet to be made. I know personally from my own experience some of the progress that we have seen. 18 years ago this month, I sat down for dinner at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown here in DC. And I sat down with John Lewis and a range of the other freedom riders who had set off 30 years before that in 1961 to try to transform the way that African Americans and all of us could travel, could live our lives, get access to decent, safe housing. And I set off the next morning after that dinner, renewed by my sitting, hearing the progress that had been made directly from John Lewis. He talked about the dinner they had had 30 years before in a restaurant in Chinatown before they set off on their trip. I went and sat at the lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, where the famous sit-ins began at those counters, and saw that what 30 years before would have provoked and did provoke riots in the streets provoked nothing more than a "can I help you today?" when 11 young people of mixed races sat down at that same counter to order a meal. I remember vividly walking across the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, the very bridge where Bloody Sunday had taken place, where hundreds, simply trying to walk the streets of Selma, Alabama, were beaten in their paths and turned back day after day until finally the National Guard came to their assistance. And again, we walked over that bridge with no more fanfare than any other group walking across the bridge, except for the police officer who approached us at the other end of the bridge, walked up and said, "Thank you for being here today. I wanted to come introduce myself. I am the first African-American police officer in the history of the police force in Selma, Alabama." So I have seen that progress firsthand. But I also know that every day in this country, Americans simply trying to gain access to decent, safe housing in neighborhoods of opportunity are turned away. Their rights are violated, and you all are on the front lines, not just of seeing the progress that has come in the last 41 years since the Fair Housing Act was signed, but you too are on the front lines seeing how much progress remains ahead of us. And I want you to know that in working together we can bring fair housing into the 21st century. And as your conference title says, realize a more perfect union, a union where all Americans can live where they choose, regardless of their race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. And I am so happy to be here today to celebrate both the progress that we've made and the long road that stands in front of us.